everybody that's been leaving comments on Apple and giving us great support. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. There's a word that we often use, we don't use it enough, but the word is blood libel. Now, for people that are not familiar with this word has been used for the better part of 2,000 years.
Started
Here
up with
we
a
are,
made-up story that Jews were killing Christian kids for their blood or some bullshit.
whatever it was, that's the etymology of the word. It was made more prevalent in the 12th century, but here we are, a thousand years later. Go on, not a story, but it's a complete fabricated rumor by the BBC this morning. So go for it.
Well, what you're talking about is this. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, get ready. And for those of you who have, you'll know what I'm talking about. 14,000 babies will die. Okay. What was the exact phrasing? Does anyone know the exact phrasing of how it started out? Because the
With
reason I'm asking is all the places, all the news media that initially had this headline have quietly, without saying anything, changed the headline. So I can't even look back to see what it said. Men, do you know it?
Yeah, it was 14,000 babies will die unless they get food within 48 hours.
Okay. So, as you've probably figured out by now, it's absolute horseshit. What actually happened was there was something, and even this was speculative and based on numbers that are manufactured, but this is where it started. There was a statement that because of the blockade that was happening, because Hamas won't release the hostages, there are a lot of pregnant women in Gaza. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But they said that there are 14,000 pregnant women in Gaza and that there may be an issue with malnourishment if there isn't some kind of food coming in through the blockade over the next period of time. And what they changed that to, whoever decided, in this case, the UN chief, decided to say that instead of pregnant women, he changed it to babies. Instead of at some point be malnourished, changed it to die. And instead of in the coming weeks or in the coming months or whatever it was, said in the next 48 hours. So totally manufactured a story that is absolutely false, doesn't exist, and is based on, even in the best case scenario, a load of crap coming out of Hamas's mouth, terrorist propaganda. So what happened? Well, besides all the news media switching it up, NBC went so far as to not only change the headline, change what was in the content of the article, they even changed the photo because half the time the photos are based on photos that happened from other wars. But in addition to that blood libel that then the journalists snagged as quickly as possible to spread, and you've heard the phrase that the truth is still putting its shoes on while a lie can go around the world. Well, I'm going to just share with you something that says, according to one organization, social media engagement with the words 14,000 babies had the potential reach of 4.5 billion people, 685,000 reported interactions, and 133,000 posts as of the afternoon. And of course, by the time the retractions come, usually on the final page of something or quietly in the corner, the damage is already done. This is the same thing that happened with the Shifa Hospital and any number of other blood libels that occurred. This is just the latest in a long line.
Right. Before I get to men, you raise an amazing, a great point, because I just want to give you the proof, even pre-social media. Man, it's taken us 2,000 years to uh, to stop the last blood libel. That's how long it's taken us to dispel that. And there are still quite a few people that believe in that myth. So here we are again, man.
Which again leads to the point that we were talking about yesterday, which is the responsibility that people with big microphones, especially established media, has to figure out whether or not what they're telling is the truth, or do they just run with propaganda that's fed to them by terrorist organizations, including UNRWA and the United Nations, which supported Hamas on 10/7. So it's something that's not going to be resolved easily. There's entrenched bias across all media, especially against Israel, but also against the United States. So we have giant legacy news organizations that are just pumping out hateful content to Americans about America on a daily basis. while they blatantly lie and cover for the fact that there are real genocides happening in Sudan. They deny that white farmers are being targeted in South Africa. Just today, we had the head of South Africa in the White House, and Trump rolled in a TV and played the videos of South African elected officials calling for the death of white people, which is unacceptable. So here we are. We have once again news media that pushed out a lie. Then they send out a retraction, which is not front page. It's always buried somewhere deep. And by that time, it's too late. So we're dealing with it, but it's not going to get fixed and it's not going to go away.
Well said. And Golan, I want to raise this point. It's nearly impossible. We all watch many of the same shows, listen to the same podcasts, whether it's that jackass Pierce Morgan or whoever it is, where he has two people on debating. And the problem is the people that are watching have made up their minds. So it's either you're watching it to hear the pro-Israel guy, the pro-America person, or the anti. You're either there to watch Cenk Younger, the old Turk, or whoever's up there debating. So you're not. It's sort of like Mend and I, one of our closest friends. Then thank God he's sober now. Nothing we could ever say was ever going to get through until he had a moment of clarity and got sober. We're dealing in a world right now, Golan, of a lot of drunken people, and there's almost no point in getting into a discussion. So the point of this is to the people that are lucid right now.
I think it's an important note because one of the things we keep saying, and we'll keep repeating it, is we're trying to push away the rumors and trying to focus on the facts. One of the things that isn't happening is facts are not getting to people. Half the time, we can't blame the people for coming into like a Piers Morgan type show and saying, I already know what side I need to be on. You know, as we spoke about yesterday, Theo Vaughn spouting his nonsense, a bunch of the people who are commenting underneath it, I imagine, are teenagers who follow Theo Vaughn who don't know any better. And now they go, this guy who I respect just told me I have values, and they might actually. He just told me which way my values should swing. And so their belief system is actually maybe even firmly in place. Maybe their ethical framework is in place. The problem is they don't know where to aim it because facts are not getting to them. I mean, there's already, we won't go into a whole thing about how TikTok suppresses certain perspectives and elevates other perspectives, but that's one of the, if not the biggest platform for young people. And it is just spewing anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-American propaganda. And you're getting to watch all the people who are just sucking it down, who don't even know that they're only getting one perspective. They think they're just getting truth after truth after truth. I'll give you one example. I don't want to go too deep into this, but using that 14,000 baby thing, one thing that isn't happening is we're not actually pointing out that the photos that all of the news media are using are not actually malnourished babies. Those are babies with deformities. Those are babies with pre-existing conditions. Why? Because almost more than any other place on earth, Gaza has more cases of consanguinity, which is inbreeding, okay, up to 50%, a little over 50%, depending, first cousin marriages, out of control, family marriages and procreating out of control.
A lot of rape.
Lot of rape. But even if you put that aside, the marriages are just accepted. And so fine, but what happens if you if you have consanguinity? It means metabolic disorders. It means malabsorption syndrome. It means immunodeficiencies. The people we're seeing, like the ones that, for instance, ABC News decided to put on their front page, where they were like, look at this girl. She only weighs whatever it was, 17 pounds. It's like, yeah, that's because her parents were related. She can't absorb nutrients. And so the picture you're using over and over and over again actually has nothing to do with even the accusation you're making. Even if it were true, you are actually presenting misinformation. People see that. They don't know what's true anymore. They just know what people they think are authority figures are telling them to think.
And I want to get to this, man. There's a constant theme running around. Every lie, every rumor is started in you could use any situation to start that lie. Israel missed with a missile. Let's start the lie. Israel reacted a certain way. America reacted a certain way. I don't blame America for what they did in 2000 with the Iraq War. I don't. I blame the aftermath. I blame the lies that occurred from it, but I don't blame always what we were trying to do. And people could disagree with me on that. But man, I want to say a lot of this lie comes from that's being reported with the 14,000 babies. It's under the guise that it's a concentration camp. It's that really is the undertone of this whole conversation, is that Gaza is a concentration camp. Now, I want to ask you, just in its most basic level, men, concentration camps weren't shooting missiles out at the Germans. Okay, they didn't have an army. They didn't. The Jews didn't have tunnels underneath to move around 500 miles. If they did, 6 million Jews might not have been slaughtered. So, this idea that it's a 25-mile concentration camp, which is double the size almost of Manhattan Island, is a massive thing that's causing this myth.
So a couple of things. One is the image that they used in this 25,000 or the 14,000 babies that were going to die. They used a picture of a starving child from Yemen. So,
Right.
the deceit is there from the start. Nobody's forget fact checking or anything. It's just complete made up bullshit. As far as um the made up lie about the concentration camp, there's a ton of videos now coming out from Gaza, from people that lived in Gaza, showing what they've lost. All the mansions, all the beautiful buildings, the beautiful restaurants, that the entire myth that it was a an open air prison just holds no water. And the other thing that they love to leave out is that Egypt has a border with Gaza and it's fortified to the max. So these people that belong to Egypt before Egypt attacked Israel, and then Egypt lost the land, the entire land of Sinai to Israel. And then when they negotiated to make peace, they did not want Gaza back. In fact, the other half of Gaza that was in Egypt, Rafah on the Egypt side, was bombed and bulldozed by the Egyptians. Nobody has a problem with that. You never even heard about it. So yes, there is lies and there's misconceptions, and then there's the innocent fools or the useful idiots who feel like they're doing good. They're trying to latch on to some sort of civil rights campaign and they want to feel like they did something that was important. They missed the entire civil rights struggle and fight that happened here that we revere, and they want to jump on the modern day one. And the modern day one, they think this is it without diving into any facts. And when you present them with facts, they don't want to hear it. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that there's a neighborhood in Gaza called Al Abid, which means the slaves, which is where they kept the blacks. They don't care about that. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about, Hamas killing their own people, shooting their own civilians, forcing them to stay in danger zones, all of that. They don't want to hear it. So facts don't matter, and you have a lot of misinformation just being spread around. And then the useful idiots that keep on respreading it and going on marches and all that other stuff. And
But
some of
that's
them are
the
being paid. There's a big financing coming from countries like China, Russia, and Iran and Qatar. They're all financing this descent, this what they call a groundswell, or what they're trying to make it look like it's a groundswell. But you see people out there with signs, they don't even know why it's out there. The same people, some of these same companies are hiring people to stand outside of the Diddy trial and protest free Diddy. And when the reporter went up to them and asked them, "What are you doing here?" And someone else right there said, "I was offered money too, and I turned it down." So they were paying them $20 an hour to stand out there with a free Diddy t-shirt and a free Diddy sign.
no,
By the way, I want to dovetail these two things together. Sorry, before you go on, Judah, the idea of people being paid off to do stuff. I'm going to go back to what you were saying about South Africa. Okay, South Africa, a great example of a country that is absolutely just corrupt as the day is long. It happens to be one of the weakest, most corrupt nations in the world. And the idea that a weak, corrupt nation is going to try to play global referee or is going to try and lecture us on morality when it's very obvious that they were paid, whether it's by Qatar, whether it's by Iran, to take Israel to the ICC, for instance, or any of the other things that they've done. This is a state that is falling apart. It is failing, and you can see that in the ways that they are treating their white citizens, the farmers, kill the boar, all of the stuff that we've been seeing come out of there. It is the same thing that allows them to invite and hang out with the jihadi murderers. They've been on the wrong side of a lot of these things, but it's not just them. That's the interesting part. The whole world right now is falling victim to payola, right? It's what I say is, are you pro-Palestinian or are you pro-paycheck, right? Because what's happening is, whether it's like we were talking about yesterday, the UK and France and Canada, and before that it was Spain and Ireland and Norway, every one of these countries has a major problem. And you can go down the list and see how much money Qatar has put into each of them, and whether that is the 5 billion upcoming going into Spain after they've already put 3 billion in. Weird that they started the I'm going to recognize Palestine thing, whether it's the $180 million that they're putting into Dublin TechMet, whether it's the, what was it, $10 billion that Norway has tied.
Let's just bring it back. The reason we're discussing this today is because there were erroneous reports that came out this morning by the BBC that was picked up by every news site about Israel starving supposedly 14,000 babies in Gaza. That's story number one. Story number two that really missed the news a lot is that Americans don't realize is that we flew in 50 white people from South Africa. And today the president of South Africa was at the White House, and Trump pretty much called him out on his bullshit, showed him the video of what's being said and what's actually going on. And it was extremely impressive that he did it. And that's another situation that people are extremely unaware of, that the media has done an amazing job in creating a narrative, in shifting a narrative of the suffering that's going on in South Africa. So that's really where so much of this stems from, is the media. And I want to move a little bit and shift topics, because this is an extremely important topic that's near and dear to all our hearts. But it's that I'm very glad the Justice Department is going after Cuomo for murder, for absolute murder. Whatever people want to say, COVID was one of the most confusing times, I think, in our lifetime, especially since 9/11, of things that were happening in our country. But there's one thing we knew for sure with COVID: whatever people want to talk about the after, we knew who was getting hurt the most. And that was the elderly, that was people with existing conditions. President Trump did everything in his power with the vaccine, but more than that, was getting ships to New York City, like turning the Jacob Javits Center into a COVID a place for people to get help. And then we have the nursing home scandals, man.
Yeah, I mean, before I jump into that, I just want to touch on the last subject for a second, where I heard a Democrat congresswoman talking this morning on another podcast, Rising, and she was talking about the South African thing and how it's completely not true. And then she brought up crime statistics from South Africa, saying that there are more blacks killed in South Africa than white farmers. Therefore, it's a made-up story, which is completely dishonest. So you cannot take run-of-the-mill crime, which Johannesburg is a very dangerous place. You can't take, crime like theft and murder in the act of theft and all that stuff, and then commingle it with crimes where people are murdered because their elected officials are telling them to go out and kill white farmers. So they're just mixing the two and saying, look, the stats are not that
Well,
big, and
it's
therefore
what
it's a
they're doing
non-story.
is what they're doing is what they do with school mass shootings in America, right? There are shootings. They put into the mass shootings the amount of people that get shot every weekend in Chicago.
No,
When you
exactly.
take when you take inner city violence out of those things, the number of mass shootings in our country is negligible per the amount of guns that we actually have in our country.
Uh,
But I think it's extremely important, though, that we talk about the Cuomo thing, because this is something that's going to start to really have to happen nationwide. Is looking at the people responsible for the deaths. And somebody like Andrew Cuomo has murder on his hands. He's got blood on his hands.
It's amazing to me that that guy who had the Cuomo show with his brother every night, he was hailed as the, the greatest thing in the Democratic Party, was refusing to take the help that the federal government was sending. So they refused to use the Jacob Javits Center, which is a massive conference hall. It's the thing takes up something like 3 square blocks on the lower west side of Manhattan. And they could have turned that into a hospital. The federal government did that. Trump sent that in along with the floating hospital, which is a giant cruise ship that's a hospital. Cuomo did not want to use anything that he viewed as playing nice with the administration. So he was trying to be defiant. And he mandated that sick patients be taken out of hospitals and sent to nursing homes. So sick elderly patients with COVID should be removed from hospitals and placed into their nursing homes or nursing homes as to make room, free up more beds for the wave of COVID patients that he thought was going to come. And therefore, he would not have to use the federal beds that were available in the Javits Center and on the floating hospital. The floating hospital. And as a result of that, bringing sick patients into nursing homes, you had a massive, we'll call it a bloodbath of elderly patients, people's grandmas and grandpas, and other people that were there for rehab, like my mom, who wound up catching COVID and dying. And they had, the refrigerated trucks outside of all of the local hospitals in New York. And that's where they were stacking the bodies because there were so many dead, they had nowhere to put them. And that's all on Cuomo. And this guy has so much nerve that he's actually running again. And they say he has a great chance of winning as mayor of New York. So he used to be the governor. Now he's running as mayor. And he actually resigned in disgrace, not because of this, but because of a sex scandal that they caught him on. So they didn't want the COVID, their COVID narrative to be tainted. So they found something else to get rid of him on. And now he's making a comeback, which is unbelievable.
We had statistics really quickly of who was getting affected by COVID. We knew that people between the ages of 0 and 35, it was nothing, or 38, it was zero. We knew age demographics, and with Cuomo knowing this and his sheer hatred of Trump, and Mend is right, he got fired for not, it wasn't a sex scandal, it was sex abuse. It was that's what he was being accused of. It was sexual assault in a sense. But Golan, what do you? How do people see this outside of the United States?
It's interesting. So I was resident of New York. I was in Brooklyn. I was outside. I was upstate. I have a house in New York, and so I was aware of it. All my friends from when I was there, I was talking to them on a regular basis. Interestingly, and forgive me, but with if the stuff that's coming out is all true, I liked Cuomo. I like both of them. I watched Chris on CNN. I thought he was one of the more honest brokers there. And I liked Andrew, and I say that unapologetically. I still listen to Chris's now new podcast, actually, since he left CNN. I think he's become a lot more honest than he was on CNN. And the interesting thing for me is that I really, because I had an affinity, like I talked about yesterday, trying to find the way to not let this be true. And I mean, there's no other way to say it. It looks bad, and I don't see any other route other than blaming him for what happened. I think everything is kind of going to come out in the wash, and it's going to be irrefutable. But at this point, this is bad behavior, and it's bad behavior, and it was done in bad faith. And people sounded the alarm for a very long time. Outside of the United States, to answer your question, frankly, nobody even knew what was going on. Nobody cared. They think about the larger issues. And while things were a mess in the United States, they were a mess elsewhere too. I was in Europe at that point, and my wife and my kid, I only had one kid at the time. Now I have two, but at the time, they didn't leave the apartment for months. I was allowed to go into the hallway. They didn't even go to the hallway of our apartment building. And now we have a house outside of town in nature, as many people did out after COVID. We didn't have it at the time. So basically, thank God we had a balcony. Thank God we had sunlight. But people were really more concerned with their own bullshit than thinking about what was going on at a local level, at a state level, or anything else outside of their own country. But for people like me, expats at the time who were not only aware but thinking about coming back and soon, we were watching it with bated breath. Cuomo, especially because of his family connections, I think it's safe to say he was an untouchable figure, or at least was considered an untouchable figure. And it looked like after all of this went down and he was still able to, as men said, walk away, not because of this, but because of something else, which still, is disputed. Was it because this was a vindictive thing? Who knows? I have no idea, and I don't pretend to. But when it came to this issue, it did seem like there was a two-tier system of justice. And that's something that we were watching very carefully.
I understand why you like him on News Nation. We're both New Yorkers. I grew up with the father. He was the best speaker, the worst governor. But again, remember, Chris Cuomo was an extremely influential member of the media. So he was extremely influential in covering up his brother's crimes. And we know that he knew about it. So these things cannot be forgotten. We can't forget what the media lies they've allowed to occur for the better part of 10 years. I don't absolve Jake Tapper right now because he says Hunter Biden is slimy for 10 years of covering up the Bidens. And this is what I want to say. I don't blame the Bidens for who they are. They're the scorpions. It's in their nature to steal, to cheat, and to lie. Joe Biden has been plagiarizing and doing this for the better part of his whole life. I would imagine since he was 6 years old, he's been doing this, from lying about how his son died to lying about how his other child died and how she was killed. It's just one big lie. What I blame the media, not the Bidens. There's always going to be bad people, man. It's the people not reporting on it. Those are the worst types of people.
Which is why it's such a big problem that this guy's making a comeback. And I think it's bad for his brother Chris to have been hired by whatever News Nation and PBD. Patrick Bet David, I think, took him on as well. That guy spewed so much bullshit for so many years on CNN. You don't continue to employ a person like that. They need to be shunned. Like Brian Stelters of the world need to be shunned. They need to be shut down and ignored. So it's a problem. I agree with you. It's you don't blame the Bidens. They're a bunch of thieves anyway. They're out, to enrich themselves. That's what they did. It was the media that covered up for them. That was the problem. Mario Cuomo, going back to the dude was a legend in New York. And in the beginning, before COVID, both Cuomo brothers seemed, like typical New Yorkers, straight to the point, not sugarcoating things, great, until the pandemic hit and you saw this insanity unfolding. And Chris Cuomo did not call any of it out. He was running cover along with Jake Tapper and everybody else at CNN for the administration. So no, I don't give them an inch of forgiveness. There's none of that. And I think if Cuomo does win, it just shows you how sick our society is.
And there's also what I love about doing this, and what I love about in the beginning of the show, it almost seems like we went off the rails, but Golan's and both of you are much smarter than I am, and the numbers that run through your head and the statistics that you pull out. What I love, one of the things that Ben Stein has taught me is numbers are really important. Numbers are incredibly important when it comes to facts. And it's important that people get an understanding and get a grip of numbers. So when Golan was going off and talking about the numbers, listen to those numbers. Those are facts, they're not opinions. And it's extremely important, again, that to Men's point, we love when people agree with us. So we're willing to take them back in, we're willing to embrace them. I mean, my God, the MAGA movement embraced Kanye West and people forget this, because he liked us for a minute. We embrace Candace Owens, a Holocaust denier, because she said she was a conservative. And let's be honest, she was a black woman that said she was a conservative, and we all said, come on into the party. We have to be the honest gatekeepers of who we say, yeah, maybe you could come in now, maybe you can't, but we don't forgive you for these horrific lies that you perpetrated and spread. And go on, what say you on that as we close up shop?
Look, I think it's absolutely true. I think at the end of the day, one of the reasons why we're doing this is to make sure that people are aware not just of what they're seeing in the news media, as we talked about. They're changing their headlines, they're changing their photos, they're changing their content, and not what they're being told on social media. God forbid, and frankly, not even what they're being told by the politicians. You know, we watched. I'm speaking of Andrew Cuomo and Chris Cuomo and everybody else. This is something that's endemic now. It's something that this is like our pandemic is misinformation. And so when you get down to the brass tacks and numbers, I mentioned this a little while ago, but there was the starvation myth that was going on in Gaza. On my other podcast, I did an entire episode where I broke down by weight, by kilogram per person, how much weight was going in there, because many people don't realize that when the UN tells you how much food is going in, they are only counting their own trucks. They are not counting what is being airlifted, and they're not counting what's coming in through other organizations. They're not counting private donations. And so it's all skewed. But if you believe the UN is a reputable organization, you're going to listen to what they say. And when they say, oh, it's way under, why would you think otherwise? Right? You have been conditioned. When I say you, I mean all of us have been conditioned to think that certain groups, certain people, certain sectors are going to be the honest brokers, are going to be the ones who tell us the truth so that we may understand what's going on. And as we talked about in a couple episodes ago, that's why the rise of the podcasters happened, because they were going to give us all sides of an issue. And then they failed. When they dropped the ball, now who do we turn to? And that's what we're doing here. So I think it is a problem, and hopefully we can start to dig our way out of this little by little by little.
Golan is absolutely correct on that. The UN only gives the stats for the trucks that they were sending in, but there's dozens of other organizations, NGOs, and the Israeli government themselves that were sending in food. They let in tons of food during the ceasefire. And if you look at the caloric intake of the average Gazan, and I'm not talking about the obese caloric intake, I'm talking about to sustain life. So they say there's a 1.7 to 2 million people there. The amount of calories that were allowed in and the amount that the amount of people that they have that would consume those calories, they had enough food to go to June or July. So that's fact. That's based on hard numbers of food that went in. As far as the big tent and the Candace Owens that you talked about before and Kanye, like one little piece on that is just because someone agrees with you on one thing does not make them your ally, or just because someone disagrees with you on something doesn't make them your enemy. You got to look at the track record, which is something that we talked about in the previous episode. You got to look at who they are, what their character is like, and then you'll know whether or not they are an ally or on your team, or if it's just a one-off. And with Candace, I mean, she ran as a conservative for a while. Something tells me she was influenced by the Andrew Tates of the world, and she's completely changed her view from the days when she was on, the Dennis Prager show or whatever. So that's for Candace. Kanye's mentally insane. That guy should be shunned and shut down. He's insane. I don't even know how he got a group of black backup singers to sing Heil Hitler. Like, where did he find those people? Who signed up for that?
This is a discussion for a whole other day. I just want to say we've discussed today three or four stories that I think are incredibly important. The lie that came out of the BBC this morning with the starvation, the murderous Andrew Cuomo and the DOJ going after him, and the bravery of President Trump to call out the leader of South Africa for the thug that he is. There are not many presidents that would do. I can't think of one president that would have done that. And I just want to end this by saying, a while back, and why important numbers are so important. There's two things. I kept on saying to people with the egg crisis, and I kept on saying, I asked everybody I knew how many chickens were killed, and there was not one person that said the correct number, that knew the number. it was 150 million chickens that were killed because of the bird flu. And I kept on saying the White House should have been messaging that message. But the next thing I want to say is just because things happen sometimes, it doesn't mean it's a conspiracy. And remember when there were like 3 or 4 plane crashes? I kept on saying to people there are 14,000 plane crashes a year. Know the numbers. And when you know the numbers, you could actually then have a real conversation. When you don't know the numbers, you're in crazy podcast land. So on that note, I want to wish everybody a good day and have a great night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.